All right, so next up, we've got Ari Gesher, and he is with Palantir, who faces an interesting challenge. Once you start pulling all the pieces together, and you find yourself with product market fit and everything's working, you have to do two things at once. You've got to execute on the thing that's working and that's helping you get ahead, and you have to start experimenting, keep experimenting so that you stay ahead of your competition. Those can feel like opposing forces. So let's learn a little more about how Palantir tackles that challenge. Please welcome Ari. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. So hypergrowth is a really kind of an interesting topic, and I don't think that you can start talking about it without having some kind of an exponential curve, right? So what I went with here, this is a head count by month. You can see I showed up right about here in the very early days when there were about 15 people. So I've been with Palantir since there were about 15 people, 8 years. I started coding when we were all in one room, reporting directly to the CTO. These days, I do sort of high-level marketing, explaining our technology, and act as a guardian of culture as we grow. So I've lived through this. These are hard-fought, hard-won lessons, right? So here's the punchline. Hypergrowth is painful. There's no way to do it gracefully. There's no way to deal with exponential growth where you're just going to get it all perfect and it's going to happen really smoothly and everything's going to be wonderful. That said, you can make it suck less, right? There are some things that you can do to offset the difficulties of exponential growth, and I'm going to go through a few of those strategies today. And I don't want to be fully negative here, right? This is a really good problem to have. This is a problem that we all want to have, right? This is the kind of challenge that you hope to get to. So the place I want to start is how do you get there, right? And anytime something is really important, it's the kind of thing that is repeated 3 times. You have a thrice repeated mantra, right? And so I'm not going to talk about how you scale your business, because that's actually very, very unique to the particular snowflake that you're building. But what is for everyone is how you actually grow your organization, right? Every organization is made up of these hairless apes that work together in kind of odd dynamics in different ways, and you're going to have very, very similar challenges, right? So these thrice repeated mantras that come up, right? Here's a good example of one. What are the 3 secrets of French cooking? Right? It's butter, butter, and I'll let you guess the third one, right? When we talk about startups, it's actually all about team, and you hear this mantra repeated over and over. It's all about the team, it's all about the team, right? So if we reverse engineer that, like how do you get to have a team? Well, let me back up. Why do you care about me telling you about this? So another item on my resume, I'm the guy who built our recruiting pipeline from scratch. The first guy, when we were like 50 people, I went out to the colleges to figure out how to bring people in. And so the real key to getting to hypergrowth is all about hiring, right? Also, you need to think about hiring, and finally, hiring, right? I can't stress that enough. If you can't get your hiring machine in order, you never get to hypergrowth, right? The business might scale, but you're gonna fall apart because you don't have enough people. So focusing on hiring is really, really important, and sometimes the amount of focus that you have to put on it is surprising. The metric that we use is that our hiring managers should be spending about 50% of their time on hiring, 50%, right? And it's not something that's exclusive just to the hiring managers. Everyone throughout the organization is part of this recruiting machine. They're all going out, either going out to job fairs or performing interviews on site or doing phone screens. As a great little task, you can give your, if you give your engineers too many phone screens, they'll engineer themselves a way out of it, right? So we had our engineers suddenly say, all right, that's it. We're going to go find this. Actually, we found a great service called Interview Street. We're going to do all the work so we can do less phone screens, right? So it's a great way to get people to invest in your infrastructure. But we like to say that recruiting and hiring is job number 2, and we stress that throughout the entire organization. So let's assume that hiring goes well, and you're riding the rocket ship. The question is, what comes next? How do you think about scaling the organization and the infrastructure around it, right? So some things to think about. You need to think about the systems that make your business work, right? And so when I say email, it's not just what happens to your email server if you add twice as many users. Will it fall over? Will it break? How long will it take to replace it? That's a really important question to ask. But a deeper question to ask is, how is the organization using email? What if our email traffic doubles? What does that do to people's inboxes? Is there a better way for us to break down communication, set up the right set of lists, and protocols around how we share information as the organization grows? Because when you're all in one room, it's super easy. You get a lot of stuff for free. And as it gets bigger and bigger, you have to figure out how to get information to propagate to different corners, right, of the organization. Food is another issue. If you're doing food, what happens if you have to feed twice as many people? Can your caterer handle that? Can you handle a second caterer? Do you have a place for everyone to sit, right? These are the kind of things that you have to think about, but you should keep it lean, right? Don't say, okay, well, we're going to get to 1,000 people one day, so let's build the dining room today, right? Instead, understand how these things scale and when they become a problem, right? Figure out what the lead times are, and think about when you put in new systems, how you're going to scale it. Don't worry about the small stuff, like can we get enough computers, right? Anything that you can just throw money at, assuming that you took care of the money problem, which is a whole other topic, but anything that you can just throw money at and doesn't have a long lead time is not a problem that you need to spend any time on. You can just kind of deal with that as it comes up. But I do want to highlight a couple things as being really important, right? And that is real estate and leadership. And why are these so important? They're absolutely essential, and they're very long lead time. They're things that you have to put in motion 6 months to a year ahead of time in order to get them right? So going back to my resume for a second, I know nothing about real estate, so let's talk about leadership, right? Leadership ends up being this kind of seminal build versus buy decision, right? Like the people who have the most context about your business, about your company, are the people that have been there the longest. So do you take someone who hasn't been a leader before and turn them into a lead? Or do you bring someone who's experienced in leadership from the outside and have them in your business? I don't have an answer to that question, but it's a very difficult, like there's there's really good tension on either side of that equation, right? At Palantir, we chose to go the build route. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a second. But what I will stress is get help, right? This is actually kind of a well-understood problem. Founders Fund, who's one of our investors, has these little conclaves where we get a bunch of the different startups in their portfolio together and we exchange notes. We got together and we were talking about marketing, but what came out was that actually all of the other startups that were there all had executive coaches for their leads that they all went to, right? And it's all about making, like leadership is a thing that's really good not to fail at, let's say. And the more help that you can get to make you more efficient, to not repeat mistakes that other people understand is really huge. So, and Palantir tends to be kind of contrarian, so we took a slightly different route. This is a book called Managing Humans. It's a great piece of writing by a guy who blogs under the name Rands, Michael Lopp, but on the website Rands and Repose. And he writes about what it takes to start as an engineer and become a manager, and what that transition happens, like what that's like in your mind and how you have to think about things differently. So we went out and found him and we just hired him. And we said, hey, why don't you come and work for us and just be you? Right? We just need you to do that thing that you do, but do it for us. And so currently he's actually a director and runs large parts of the company, but the first part of his job was actually to be an individual contributor and build a leadership system for the entire company. And the way he did this was actually by he called himself the CTO, which was the Chief Therapy Officer. So he actually had 30 hours of meetings a week with all of the leads, people who had never been leads before, right? And they would just sit for an hour and talk through the different challenges. And we set up a system where we would expose them to things like having to fire people or put people on a performance plan in a stimulated environment, so when they ran into it the first time, it wouldn't be a surprise. Build this capacity early. Like, turn someone into a lead and give them 2 people to work for them, right? Because then they get to sort of make those mistakes during a period of time when things are most forgiving. And later on, if you want to pile more people on, it's actually, they're seasoned already, right? Very important to take those inexperienced people and give them that sort of zone of comfort where they can sort of try things out and see what works. And when you get into a situation of hypergrowth, there isn't time to build like actual command and control systems for everybody to have all the context about everything that's going on, right? So you want to train your leads to not be like bosses, to have their fingers in everything. Instead, the way I like to think of it is they are the communications node in a very large network of adepts, right? If you've got your hiring going well and you're hiring the right people, your people know what they should be doing, and they're the best in the world at their jobs. The job of the leads is to make sure they're working on the right thing, and that the coordination overhead, which is the chaos that kills you as you grow, that coordination overhead is reduced by them being the sort of the aggregate communication links between different parts of the organization. So don't think about them as being in charge, think about them as being the connectors to the rest of the organization. And if they keep that philosophy in mind, things will go smoothly. So the last thing I want to talk about is actually culture. Not actually a bowl of yogurt, but that'll work. And culture is an important thing to think about as you scale. And there's a couple simple tips here, I think. Get it right early, right? And I give a talk to all of our new hires about our culture. And in it, what I say to them is, this is not something that we made up, right? This is not something that we invented. We sat on a whiteboard and said, what should our culture be? Oh, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good, right? Instead, your culture ends up being an emergent property of the people that you hire, right? It's really set by those kernels, those early people that become part of your organization. So when you're making your really early hires, don't think of it just in terms of can they do the job, but what happens when they're the seed for a crystal that grows around them? Is that actually the organization that you want to be growing? They're very, very key. Enable cross-pollination, and that's a really important thing to make a place feel small and make it part of your culture. Spend time, spend resources, spend money on doing things like buying video game systems. And you say, well, how do video games help, right? And the answer is the people who want to play a video game together don't actually work together. They're on slightly different teams, but it gives them a chance to sit in a room and swear at each other for an hour. And when they're done, they're friends. And now you actually have a link in that organization that there was no way to put on the org chart, there was no way to build, right? And so it's everything from video games to communal meals to sports teams. All these things are actually worth investing in as you grow to build those non-obvious links, those very high bandwidth useful back channels inside your organization to keep things as sort of low friction as possible, even as the whole thing expands. And the final thought I'll give you is to indoctrinate culture. And this is something, one of those lessons that we learned through pain. We had a year where we went from 400 to 800 people. And we hadn't really spent the time to scale our leadership systems, to spend the time to teach people about what to expect when they came into the organization. And that's like the culture talk that I give sort of came directly out of that. And the idea was you want to give people a framework in which to understand what they're about to experience. When they come in to a 500-person company or 1,000-person company, it's kind of like that first week of school or college where everyone's trying to make friends and figure out what's going on. If you can give them just a little bit of an understanding of what they're about to get into, this is how we work together. These are our values, right? Really simple, high-level stuff. It makes it much easier for them to understand what's about to happen and then take ownership of the culture, which is a really important piece that everyone feel empowered, everyone feel like it's a part of what they're doing. So, in conclusion, hypergrowth, very difficult, very fun, very exciting. Do what you can to prepare for it. And I think the most important thing is don't be afraid that if it hurts, to know that you're not doing it wrong. You're doing it right. Good luck.